What I'm going to do now is to simply give some kind of response. I don't want to exactly call it an answer, but I would like to give some kind of response to each of the discussion questions. And this is not to say that I'm right and you're wrong. As I said before, I don't think philosophy has a simple right and wrong. I mean, obviously, I've studied the questions and I know what other people have said, and I know what a lot of students have thought about the various questions throughout the discussion areas in our course. However, that does not necessarily give me such an advantage. In many ways, I think it's the opposite. I think that reading The Cave, excuse me, and reading the Apology and reading the Symposium and reading Aristotle and so on and so forth, I think seeing them with fresh and free eyes almost has an advantage. Okay, and I really mean that. I mean, I think if you go through the responses to all the discussions so far in our class, you'll see how good they are. I think it's just obvious. It's really that they're really good. They're really interesting. There's not any that are sort of flat. So the this admitted, shall I say, I do want to give you not exactly some guidance, but I want to give you the opportunity to hear me, so to speak. That is to say, hear someone who studied this stuff a lot. I think that can be helpful. But let me just get into it now. Okay. If I had to give a quick, because as always, I've got to keep these things to, to under 6 or 7 minutes, or they're hard to load, and then they often crash, and so we don't want that. Okay, so getting into it, I would say I have four reasons that why the cave in particular is so important. And there's one of them is one that like a normal reader probably wouldn't come up with. So it's worth saying. And that is the influence. Now, it would take like 10 hours to give an account of how influential, sorry, the cave has been on other people. And I say people and not philosophers on purpose, because ranging from students to philosophers to politicians to writers to poets. Is there anything else? The cave has just been extremely influential. Now, that is to say that they all those people that I mentioned, record a direct influence. There's also indirect influence, which I want to talk about later in the course. It's kind of too complicated to talk about right now. So for the first reason why it's important is influence directly and explicitly thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Okay, that's point one. I'm going to come back to this once we get to the part of the course about religion and God in the Middle Ages. Okay, this will get very important. That is to say, the influence. Okay, so the influence is number one. It's important to understand that the influence is not an accident. It happens for very good reasons. Then this is going to be my second reason why the cave is so important. And that second reason is the compression of the document. We've got a document which is under 500 words long that is so rich in themes that in order to even do a simple explanation of the cave, just a very simple one, I mean, takes about a day. I mean, if you're talking through the important ideas, the narration, and the relationship between the parts, that is something kind of basic. That still takes about a day to talk through. I have taught in class the cave before, and sometimes to work through it carefully, it takes about 5 or 6 or 7 classes, really. And it could take longer, but that's to do a half decent job. So number two is it's very compressed. Number three, and this is kind of the key to the whole thing, it expresses and explains and analyzes and represents four of the major stages in human life. And this is part of the compression. It's not just compressed, but it's essentially compressed. And those four stages are as follows. Now, there's another tape where I cover these, but let me do it kind of quickly. First of all, the inside of the cave portrays and represents the ignorance of the human condition, that is all its limitations, and human fallibility in general. So that's one. Number two is you see the path out of there and what that involves. And as I've said, this kind of has two elements. It can be either personal growth or formal education. It can be understood in both ways. So that's the second one. That is the path out. The path of transcending ignorance and absence of engagement in life. The third step that is covered is the conflict between those two stages, between basically an unenlightened person and the enlightened person. And what Plato is saying is really important, because he's saying that there's incredible resistance to education. There's incredible resistance to personal growth. There's tremendous resistance toward evolution from a negative state to a positive state. Okay, that's the third. Okay, the fourth issue, or the fourth area that is posed in the cave, is in a way the most important of all, and that is, how do those stages relate to your own personal life? The cave is a big question, really, and it forces you to ask, are we, like the people in the cave? Number one. Number two, do I have any experience of the growth, the ascent out of the cave, or the kind of enlightenment that Plato is talking about? Number one. Number two, do I have the experience in my personal life with this resistance of most people most of the time to growing? And those are all very serious questions. I don't want to say that Plato's way of stating them or Plato's beliefs about them is right or wrong, true or false. That's not my issue at all. My point here as your philosophy teacher is to emphasize that he's asking this question, and that's ultimately what philosophy is about. It's about asking questions. The philosophers are not giving you answers. They're not like drill sergeants telling you to do 1, 2, 3. That's not what this study is about. This study is about helping people look at their own lives in a fresh and intelligent and thoughtful and a caring way, and ask these basic questions about human existence. How limited am I? How engaged in education am I? Number three, how much am I resisting? And how much do most people resist enlightenment, growth, and understanding? Okay, so that's it. Philosophy is not a bunch of answers, really. It's a way of asking questions. Okay, that's why the cave is important, and I hope that helps. And I'm sorry, I would like to keep these a little shorter. Okay, teachers, blah, blah, kind of gets